We started this initiative to investigate what communities actually felt about purified recycled water for drinking. We have a cycle of droughts and floods in Australia, and purified recycled water for drinking could help with both of those in supplying water security to communities that currently rely on rainfall-dependent supply. We wanted to make sure that communities were given a choice as to what water security option was best for them, and we felt like there wasn't enough discussion on purified recycled water for drinking. We surveyed 1,400 people across the nation, including telephone surveys, online surveys, as well as a focus group in Orange. This is a first of its kind national survey that provides regional and metropolitan area attitudes towards alternative water sources and how people use water and how they relate to water that's coming out of their tap. Our partners, AREMA, were instrumental in designing the research as well as being able to make sure that it was statistically significant. We wanted to make sure that whatever results we came out with were actually representative of community. It is the transparency and showing how people actually feel in different areas that was of interest to us. And we really felt like there was an opportunity to identify where people were more inclined towards it and where they weren't.
Most respondents only had some knowledge of how their local water supply systems are managed, and their understanding of PRW was even more limited. Amongst the respondents who felt neutral about adding PRW to their local water supply, most simply didn't know enough or have an opinion or were undecided. And this suggests to us that there is a significant opportunity to leverage water literacy to improve understanding and acceptance of PRW. We gauged the respondents' disposition towards PRW at the start and the end of the survey. And even though the survey comprised of questions rather than information, what the data revealed was that respondents were more willing to have a conversation about PRW towards the end of the survey. And this tells us that engaging the community in a conversation about PRW is not likely to create a substantial negative reaction. After the initial survey, we held focus groups with people in Orange to understand their attitudes towards PRW in a bit more detail. And what these sessions told us is that consistent and repeated information and communication about PRW to communities is required to increase acceptance and understanding of PRW.
The experience of water scarcity really drove people's acceptance to looking at alternative water sources. We feel like that just falls into the bucket of if it's not broken, don't fix it. And so people would be wondering why we're looking at alternative water sources if they didn't know they had an issue to begin with. One of the most significant findings in Orange was their higher acceptance of having that discussion on purified recycled water for drinking because of their very recent lived experience in the 2017 to 2019 drought, where they had very acute water shortages, and the community would have been very aware of their water scarcity issue.
One of our key findings was a link between trust in government and willingness to implement PRW. The reason for this is that in Australia, the majority of water utilities are either state government organisations or local government organisations. So communities with the trust in their government will also have a trust in their local water authority, and then by extension be willing to discuss things like PRW and other alternative water sources. In the past, water utilities around Australia have often been reluctant to introduce alternative water sources for the perception that communities were opposed to them. This study and others in the future will look to provide water authorities with an independent source of truth so that they can confidently introduce programs such as PRW.
So water has become more important than gold in Australia. It's scarce and it's precious. And because of that, people really want to have a role, want to play a part in the discussions about water and make an informed choice about where they get their water from. So understanding community opinions about water and their existing and alternate water choices are really, really important then for long-term policy making, particularly from a social, economic and environmental perspective.
The most important thing about purified recycled water for drinking is having that initial conversation, not being scared to have it. The results show that there was very little strong negativity towards it. And for the most part, when we dove into that negativity, most people would still be willing to consider having that conversation without having a strong negative reaction to it. The importance of having that conversation now is to make sure that we are in a position, if we need to build this infrastructure, to be ready to do that. Because this infrastructure takes a long time to build, and as we found out in the previous drought, it's impossible to build yourself out of drought. So this needs to be done beforehand, and the conversations need to start now.